Chinese Communist government recently celebrated its 100th anniversary with great fanfare, despite conducting a genocide against Uyghur Muslims and imprisoning Catholic pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai. Meanwhile, the UK and Ireland remain under COVID lockdowns that are still in some places rather severe. Joining me now to discuss all of this and more is Irish businessman, telecom entrepreneur, and activist Declan Ganley. Thanks for joining us, Declan. I want to begin with China. The communist government has imprisoned Catholic media tycoon Jimmy Lai since last year. They shuttered his Hong Kong newspaper, Apple Daily, arrested most of his staff. They've effectively silenced the voice of freedom in Hong Kong and really throughout China. In June, just prior to the shutdown of the paper, the Wall Street Journal wrote this of Jimmy Lai: as Chinese Communist Party seeks to expand its political control over critics worldwide, often with the acquiescence of Hollywood and U.S. tech companies, Jimmy Lai speaks for everyone fighting for the cause of liberty. Declan, you're a personal friend of Mr. Lai. How critical is his struggle against the CCP, and why is it vitally important to the rest of the world?
It's enormously critical, Raymond. Jimmy Lai is becoming something of a St. Thomas More of China. He is going through a white martyrdom right now. He and his wife, Teresa, his family are going through immense suffering for the cause of freedom, the cause of democracy, and for his faith. Because Jimmy's courage, his fortitude is underpinned by his faith, his Catholic faith. And the fact that the Communist Party of China have gone to the lengths that they have gone to crack down on Jimmy, to cast him into prison, to destroy his business, to put Apple Daily out of business in Hong Kong, seize their bank accounts, stop them from printing, as you said, the last voice of freedom in Hong Kong, that underlines how important Jimmy Lai is to the Communist Party of China. They see him as an existential threat, because if they didn't, they would leave him alone. That's how effective even a single voice in defense of freedom like Jimmy is in standing up to the tyranny of the Communist Party of China.
Declan, this year, Lai was awarded the Gwen Ifill Press Freedom Award by the Committee to Protect Journalists. This is a pretty important honor. Why does it seem that freedom of the press is in jeopardy, not only in obvious places like communist China, but across many of the Western democracies?
It's very worrying. It's a trend that we've now seen that's been going on for years. In the case of the Communist Party of China, it's a trend that they have exploited. We need the contest of ideas. We need to be able to speak freely and to talk about, obviously, things that affect democracy, that affect our faith, to exercise religious freedom in the public square, etc. Why are we seeing this trend towards shutting it down? Because vested interests, crony corporatists, moneyed interests that are not interested in competition or in being challenged, with ideas that are outside of the narrow frame within which they want the world to be seen and defined. They want to restrict and limit the outlets for ideas that challenge this consensus. And that consensus ever more suits the Communist Party of China and its agenda, which is to restrict freedom in the world, extend their own power. So none of this is serving any of us well.
In recent days, we've heard a lot about censorship by social media sites like Twitter, Facebook. Facebook's encouraging users to report other users who might become radicalized. Twitter recently suspended an account of New Zealand China expert Anne-Marie Brady, who has been critical of the Chinese Communist Party. Her suspension has since been overturned. But Declan, from your perspective in the media business, why do these social media outlets seem to be more than willing to censor opposing opinions or broader opinions, particularly when it comes to China, and how dangerous is this path we're headed down?
Well, I think the trend towards the kind of censorship that we've seen in social media is fed by two things. One, it's fed by the pools that they are recruiting from that tend to lean in one particular direction. politically, not exclusively, but they tend to lean in that direction, and money. That is to say that China is the addiction that so many large corporations have is to the cash flow that they can generate by being given access to the market that the Communist Party of China currently control. That's the largest market in the world in terms of potential consumers, and it's frightening what some crony corporates, what large corporations, including media corporations, are willing to do, the blind eyes that they're willing to turn when it comes to what it takes to be given access to the Chinese marketplace. And I think that those are all factors that are influencing what I will call editorial decisions that are being made in these companies, companies that should be making no editorial decisions whatsoever. If they want to make editorial decisions, they should be subject to the same defamation laws, accountability, and everything else globally that everybody else in the media is. There cannot be one rule for them and other rules for others.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump announced a class action lawsuit this week against big tech throughout the country. Take a look at this. I want your reaction.
We're demanding an end to the shadow banning, a stop to the silencing, and a stop to the blacklisting, banishing, and canceling that you know so well. In addition, we are asking the court to impose punitive damages on these social media giants. We're going to hold big tech very accountable.
Declan, your thoughts. These bans aren't just about criticism of China, but concern any viewpoint contrary to the orthodoxy of the moment. And as Trump went on to say, the target could be anyone, including a president.
So, I mean, we saw in the run-up to the last election, we saw one of the oldest newspapers in America, the New York Post, being banned from Twitter. Its account was shut. They were denied access to their Twitter account, which, whatever you think, whatever your political views are, that one of America's oldest and most prominent newspapers is shut down from a platform like Twitter it was stunning to me. It was shocking. And we have to allow, coming back to the point I made a little bit earlier, these are supposed to be neutral, open access platforms, freely available to anybody that's not, a terrorist, to be able to have free access and express their opinions on. There's something wrong when mullahs in Iran who call for the destruction of Israel and all sorts of other things, who are very much the antithetical to, if you like, the modern agenda, where their Twitter accounts are and social media accounts are allowed to stay up, while we see others operated by people who are democratically accountable, who are open and active in the public square, where we see them get shut down. So we need these companies to be subject to laws and to rules that level the playing field, because we cannot have people who are unaccountable making editorial decisions that are denying large numbers of people now free access to the public square. When you own the public square, you are responsible for keeping it free, and if you are starting to block access to it, you need to be held up to account, and legislation needs to be passed to ensure that that happens if necessary.
Well, we've seen in recent months that these social media giants, they just expand the definition of hate speech or misinformation, including things that now we know are entirely true about vaccine reactions, hydroxychloroquine, and some of these therapeutics that were damned at the beginning when they were first announced. And now we find out actually could have saved hundreds of thousands of lives. So it does beg the question, who's vetting it? Who's in charge of deciding this idea is worthy, that one is misinformation? We've got to have a public conversation about that. And speaking of social and political orthodoxy, the EU is now threatening the nation of Hungary with the full force of EU law if it fails to repeal a new law banning the promotion of homosexuality in Hungary's schools. Watch.
If Hungary doesn't set things right, the Commission will use the powers invested in it as the guardian of the treaties. Let's be clear. We will use these powers whichever member state impedes European law.
Declan, you've waded into EU politics yourself. What do you make of this threat? Some at the EU want to withhold COVID funds until Hungary complies.
Raymond, I am very fearful, and I've been very concerned for more than a decade now, that the direction that the EU is headed in is going to unleash centrifugal forces, and is unleashing centrifugal forces that will end up blowing the European Union apart. And some people might say, well, that would be a welcome development, but I wouldn't be one of them, because putting Humpty Dumpty back together again will probably take another couple of centuries and at least one more big war, and I would rather not have to go through that. The fact that the EU did not reform itself from the bottom up, did not make its institutions properly democratically accountable, did not go through the reforms that it should have done, and instead forced through the Lisbon Treaty formula, which I opposed at the time, set in course a series of events that resulted in Brexit. And that's a controversial thing for me to say back in Europe, but it's true. If that had been addressed at the time, if those reforms had been done, I do not believe the circumstances that led to Brexit would have taken place. Furthermore, when we see countries in the Visegrad group, which is the group of Eastern European countries, one of which includes Hungary, of course, when they are taking positions that are out of step with what is fashionable in Brussels at the moment, and Brussels oversteps its domain, whether it's what it's doing with Hungary right now, or whether what's going on with Ireland with regard to its tax sovereignty and corporate tax rates. Right. These attacks on issues that are sovereign, that are the responsibility of the nation states that make up the European Union, when you apply these pressures, be it on Ireland over corporate taxation, be it on Hungary over these family laws, those create pressures and feed anti-European sentiments in all of these countries that create more facies and a greater tendency, not for Europe to come together on things that we need to work together on, but for Europe to get blown apart. We need elites globally. We need elites to be elite again. Whether it's allowing media, consensus, and groupthink to get so stupid to the point that you have made that we can't even discuss science properly anymore, where we end up seeing months and months of COVID propaganda that is false, that is unscientific, when the Wuhan lab theory is considered a conspiracy theory, something that the dogs in the streets a year ago knew was the most likely source of what happened. When these things are denied to ordinary people, when things that are plain for people who don't have a third-level education, may not even have a second-level education, but things that are plainly false are proffered as being truth, who can expect anybody to trust elite institutions? We need to make elites elite again. We need institutional reform, and we have to stop being really obviously stupid and embarrassing ourselves in front of Europe, in front of the United States. We need to start getting the big things right again, and we've not been doing that for too long. And the media, ultimately, it's their responsibility and their solemn duty to hold all sides to account and to allow all ideas to get debated in the public square.
Yeah. Before we run out of time, I have to touch on the COVID lockdowns in the UK and your native Ireland. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced that the lockdowns should be relaxed as of July 19th. Northern Ireland will relax its pandemic restrictions slightly beginning July 26th. Now, the COVID status of the Republic of Ireland, where you reside, is another story. The reopening there has been postponed indefinitely, according to some media reports. Give me a sense of where things stand. And I know you sued over public worship last year. What's the state of all of that?
So the state of the public worship case, so there was the longest ban in the world, apart from North Korea and Saudi Arabia, on Christian public worship was in the Republic of Ireland, believe it or not. And that ran for months. So we first started taking a case on that in October of last year. We have not yet been able to get to trial. We have a case hearing this week in the High Court in Ireland on the question of mootness, that is whether or not the trial can even go ahead because has it been timed out because so much time has elapsed since we first took it, and some of those bans have subsequently been lifted. But in Ireland, for example, right now, First Holy Communions are banned, confirmations are banned, weddings are limited to 20 people, funerals are limited to 20 people. There are pretty onerous restrictions on the number of people that can go to Mass in a church or even in a cathedral. And the dialogue between the government and the leadership of the Catholic Church in Ireland has been appalling. The government announces things on Twitter without speaking with the leadership of the Catholic Church. Archbishop Eamon Martin, the head of the Catholic Church in Ireland, decried this last week in the Irish media. And then we have this insane lockdown scenario in Ireland where indoor dining is banned indefinitely. So our small, the Irish pubs, family restaurants, cafes, etc., are being put out of business in their thousands upon thousands. Tourism is being destroyed in Ireland, and all of the jobs that depend on it. So there's carnage going on in the economy because of these lockdowns. There is this body of experts, of medical experts called NPHET, we call them, NPHET in Ireland. They seem to be running the country. They make announcements. They don't even liaise with the government anymore before making announcements. They simultaneously release stuff on Twitter and tell the government at the same time what's going on. We are being run by a bunch of unaccountable, unelected experts who have a very narrow focus. I mean, there were 60,000 people at the football match between England and Denmark in Wembley Stadium. In Ireland, that's just not allowed to happen. Ireland actually just cancelled the games that it was supposed to have in these European Championships. They just banned all of them. They've banned the Dublin City Marathon, which was due to happen in October, by which time everyone in Ireland will be vaccinated. Silverstone's Grand Prix, the big motorsport event in the UK, is happening in a few weeks' time. There's going to be 140,000 people at that, and yet we can't have the Dublin City Marathon at the end of October. So it's
crazy.
Crazy is the word. It's psychotic at this point. That's what it is.
Well, Declan, I hope things open up there. We will check in with you for the latest. Thank you for being here. And you can follow Declan Ganley on Twitter at Declan Ganley. Thank you so.
Thank you, Raymond.